Okay, welcome everyone. So glad all of you could make it. Wow, I have a lot of windows up on my screen now. I really appreciate you taking the time to attend today's special webinar on solar panels. Moving, oh, I didn't advance the slide. There we go. So quick outline of what we're going to cover today. First, I'll do the introductions. Then we'll get into the main content of the presentation. That'll be about 35 minutes. Then I will make an offer to all of you about one of our services here at SYB, and then we'll get into Q&A. I know several of you posted questions in advance onto the form, and then we also have the Q&A pod. So if at any time you have questions, put them in there, and Cathy will get to as many as possible once the presentation is complete. So briefly about me, my name is R. Blank. I am the CEO of Shield Your Body, formerly on the faculty of the University of Southern California Viterbi School of Engineering. Along with my father, Dr. Martin Blank, I co-authored Overpowered about the science of EMF health effects. And this follows a 20-year career in software engineering. As you already know, today we're going to take a deep dive into solar panels. I wanted to do a webinar on this topic because over the past several months, a lot of people have been emailing into SYB asking about this question. And it really is one of the most difficult questions that we regularly get from the community. While employing alternative energy sources like solar can be great for the environment, many people believe they can cause health problems. The topic can get very technical very quickly. And so I invited our senior EMF consultant, Cathy Cooke, to discuss this topic in further detail. I'm sure you know how frustrating and confusing it can be to wade through all the information on the internet, let alone know what's credible information. And that's why I'm thrilled to have Cathy bring us the truth about solar, EMFs, and how it affects our health. If you haven't met Cathy yet, I'll take a quick second to introduce her. Cathy Cooke is our senior EMF consultant here at SYB. She's a board-certified holistic nutritionist, a certified building biology environmental consultant, and a certified electromagnetic radiation specialist with the Building Biology Institute. I think maybe you need a few more certifications, Cathy. That's quite As building biologist, she assesses buildings for anything that may be causing health problems. This includes indoor air quality, mold, chemical off-gassing, ventilation, combustible gas products, and of course, EMF exposure. She has combined holistic nutrition and building biology to address both the body and environment to help her clients achieve optimal health. She's also the founder of Idahoans for Safe Technology, an advocacy and awareness group for the safer use of modern day communications. Cathy is originally from Kansas City, Missouri, and currently lives in Boise, Idaho. If you'd like to learn more about her work, her website is wholehomeandbodyhealth.com. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Cathy. So let me make you the host.
Great.
And
okay.
I'll stop sharing.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here. And how does...
Great.
Okay, excellent. Just get rid of this little piece here. Okay. So thank you so much, R, for that introduction. It is really a pleasure to be here with the fantastic Shield Your Body community once again. This is my 4th webinar with Shield Your Body. So if you haven't caught the first 3, I encourage you to go back and listen to the replays that are on the Shield Your Body website. Can you hear that? I'm sorry about that dog in the background. Let me take care of that. Okay.
It's very, yeah.
That's what happens when you're working from home, right?
Yeah, go on, yeah.
So these previous websites have done really full of a lot of information regarding EMS and how to protect you and your family. So I really suggest that you go back and listen to those if you haven't already. So as R stated, I'm a building biologist and a holistic nutritionist. If you're not familiar with building biology, I encourage you to check out their website to learn more. They're really a fantastic organization that trains numerous building biologists each year. I really can't speak highly enough about the organization and the amazing work they're doing to help people live better lives. Okay, so let's jump right into our topic today, solar panels. So I should note that there is an accompanying blog post that I wrote that is on the Shield Your Body website in case you want to get a little bit more information and to read this information rather than watching. That is there for you as a resource. So I will be the first to admit that this topic is challenging for me. I think it's very important for us to reduce our use of fossil fuels and to invest in cleaner and greener energy sources. You know, harnessing the power of the sun, the wind, water, and other renewable resources seems like the perfect solution for many of the world's current issues. The reality of these applications, however, leaves a little to be desired. They are, in fact, not perfect solutions for several of the reasons that I'm going to cover today. So, like with most things, there are advantages and disadvantages. And as is the same situation with solar, let's take a look at some of the advantages first. So there are many reasons why people choose to install solar panels on their homes. The most obvious reason is that it's good for the environment. Solar panels produce clean energy without the use of hazardous emissions from fossil fuels. And by reducing reliance on fossil fuels, we can help to lower greenhouse gases. Reducing greenhouse gases is good for the health of the planet and for our health as well. Another great reason that people are interested in solar is for the financial savings. Solar panels can be expensive investment up front, but over time, you will begin to see a reduction in your monthly utility bills. How much you save depends on how many panels you have, how sunny it is where you live, and how much energy you consume. Most solar companies predict that you will achieve a complete return on your investment in approximately 7 to 12 years. After that, you will see continued savings for the 25-year expected lifespan of your system. And that's important to note. Your system will not last forever. You may need to replace the panels after about 25 years. Some estimates put your total savings at about $20,000 over the course of 20 or so years. And, you know, I mean, that's no small number. That's pretty significant. So part of the savings also has to do with the projected increase in the value of your home. As there is an ever-growing demand for green energy, homes with existing solar panels are very attractive. Depending on where you live, you can expect a property value increase of roughly 2 to 5%. The latest statistics I looked at had the median home price in the US at $329,000. That means you can ask an extra $6,500 to almost $16,000 for installing solar on your home. I don't know about you, but I mean, that sounds pretty good. What about the disadvantages? So let's take a look. First of all, there are significant upfront costs that may make installation prohibitive for many. While most homeowners eventually see a reduction in their utility bills, the approximate upfront cost ranges from $10,000 to $27,000, depending on the extent of the installation. This simply makes it unachievable for many people. Another downside to solar is just it's not very efficient in many environments. In obviously warm and sunny places like Florida or California, it makes sense to harness the power of the sun that is, so ubiquitous. Same with Colorado, you have something like 300 sunny days. It's a great place to have solar. But what if you live in Alaska or Portland or Seattle? In mostly cloudy or overcast areas, you may not actually recover the cost from your investment. There's also a bit of controversy regarding the actual environmental impacts when it comes to solar. We're all aware of the positive environmental impact of reducing greenhouse gases, but solar is not without its own environmental issues. The problem lies in the production of the panels themselves. Some hazardous chemicals are used in the production and cleaning of the panels. These chemicals may include acetone, hydrogen fluoride, sulfuric acid, trichloroethane, and many others. Additionally, in the case of large-scale solar plants in some communities, large parcels of land need to be cleared. This can lead to issues like deforestation and threatened wildlife habitat. And finally, the manufacturing process itself utilizes significant resources like water, fuel, transportation, and chemicals. Critics of this debate say that, yes, there is some initial environmental impact on the production of the panels, but over the lifespan of the system, the amount of greenhouse gases saved will outweigh the production costs. So for those living in climates appropriate for solar, there are some definite advantages, and it's easy to understand why the solar industry has experienced such a dramatic increase in the last decade. But what about the health implications? Is solar safe? What does it do for your home? What does it do to your home? What does it do to the people living inside your home? Of course, this is the real question we're looking to answer in today's webinar. So let's take some time to dive into the details. So in order to answer this question, let's have a brief primer on electricity. There are two different ways that electricity flows. There's DC, or direct current, which means the electricity flows only in one direction. Then there is AC, or alternating current, which means the motion of the electrons constantly changes direction. In our homes, the electricity is delivered via alternating current, or AC. Many of our devices, however, use direct current, like a laptop or your phone charger. When we plug the laptop in to charge it, or the phone, especially on our laptops, you'll notice that the cord has this big square box on it. And so I'm wondering, did you ever think about what that big square box was? What does it do? It's actually an adapter, and it does a few things. But one of its primary functions is to convert the alternating current coming from the wires in your walls into direct current so that it can power the device. So with solar panels, it's kind of the opposite. The panels themselves create direct current, which must be converted to alternating current. The solar panel system will be connected to an inverter, which takes the low voltage, high current signals and converts them to alternating current so that it can be sent through your home's wires. The process of this conversion creates what we call microsurge electrical pollution, or dirty electricity, or DE for short. As most of you are probably aware, dirty electricity is one form of EMF that can cause a whole host of symptoms for many people. And in case you're wondering, your computer charger will also contribute to dirty electricity, as do many devices in your home. But today, we're just going to focus on solar panels. So the question we're faced with then is, what kind of biological impact does dirty electricity have on the body? And is it really going to affect you and your family? Now remember, there are four main fields that produce EMFs in your home: electric fields, magnetic fields, radio frequency, and dirty electricity. Also worth noting are the peripheral fields of static electricity and blue light. There are multiple ways in which EMFs affect us on a cellular level. Some of the primary ways that EMFs affect your biology is through oxidative stress, upregulation of the sympathetic nervous system, impairment of the nervous system, and other mechanisms we are only beginning to study and understand. So what can we say specifically about dirty electricity? In my personal experience, DE has been the most underappreciated and misunderstood of the four fields. Among my most sensitive clients, it's often the DE that is causing the most symptoms. By now, I'm sure you're aware of many of the symptoms that EMF exposure can cause, including headaches, tinnitus, insomnia, muscle weakness, anxiety, depression, cramping, irritability, memory issues, fertility issues, cognitive decline, and a whole lot more. Different people will have different reactions to each of the fields. For example, I have clients that don't get many symptoms from radio frequency, but they react violently to magnetic fields. I have others that don't notice high electric fields, but can't be anywhere near dirty electricity. And of course, I have numerous clients that react quite severely to all of the fields. It's really person dependent. So when it comes to the scientific research on DE, we can thank Dave Stetzer and Sam Milham, who have done a significant amount of research in this area. And I have links to much of their research in the blog post on the Shield Your Body website that I mentioned earlier, if you want to check those out. Some of the more common issues they have documented with prolonged DE exposure are what you see on the screen here. Behavior issues, chronic fatigue syndrome, blood sugar imbalances, fertility challenges, cellular metabolism imbalances, nervous system dysregulation, cognitive issues, and of course, a whole lot more. So the question we are faced with now is, will solar panels on my home present enough dirty electricity that it will impact my family? That question is nearly impossible to answer because we can't predict what will happen to any given person in the future. So if you were to ask me, Cathy, if I smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day, is that going to give me cancer? There's no way that I can answer that question. We know your chances are higher, but it's certainly not a given. And so it goes with EMF exposure. We can't predict if you will or will not develop health issues from your exposure, but your chances are definitely increased. There are, of course, many variables to factor into the equation. If you have solar on your home, how often is it running? How much time do you spend in the house? Do you have pre-existing conditions? Are you already sensitive? How efficient is your inverter? Unfortunately, there's no way for anyone to say, your solar system will give you X amount of dirty electricity. There are just too many variables for any given situation to be able to determine that. Of course, if you already have them installed, you can and should test with different meters to find out what's going on inside your home. So here are a few of the most common meters that are used to measure dirty electricity. The first one here is Alpha Labs or Green Wave's dirty electricity meter. The middle one is the Graham-Stetzer meter. Both of these meters cost around $125 and can be used by the layperson. They're really easy to use. You just plug them into an outlet and you get an immediate reading. I personally use both of these when I'm doing home surveys. The meter on the right is an oscilloscope. This is meant for an EMF professional, and it gives a visual readout of the sine wave on your home. I also use this meter on assessments along with the picoscope, which is not pictured here. These, of course, are more advanced tools that we use to get a better understanding of what's going on in a specific situation. I recommend that everyone has at least one of the first 2 meters and that you measure frequently. Conditions change all the time, and it's good to know what you're dealing with in your home. Now I want to show you a few pictures of my oscilloscope readings so you can see what DE looks like on the wires in your home. And I apologize if this picture is a little fuzzy. On my computer, it's looking a little bit fuzzy, but you can get the idea of what we're looking for here. So this is a picture of my own oscilloscope showing a really nice sine wave. This is what I would love to see in everyone's home. What I'm looking at specifically is that yellow line. It is reading the energy on the hot wires of the house. It's thin and mostly smooth. And by this account, this home has very, very, very low dirty electricity. Now keep in mind, this is just a general reading. If I were to turn things off and on, this picture is definitely going to change. So for an example, let's look at a picture of what happened in one of my clients' homes when I turned on a fluorescent light. Now that is very dramatic. This is a very significant DE exposure. And this is just one light. In this case, it was a fluorescent light in the kitchen, and I was picking up this same reading all throughout the house when it was turned on. The sine wave went back to normal when it was turned off. Now, if one light can do this to your entire house, what do you think a slew of solar panels might be able to do? So let's take a look. So this is a picture of one of my colleagues' own solar systems on his home, and it was functioning in the afternoon. So this is actually pretty hairy. It might look better initially than that fluorescent light, but there's a lot more to the situation than just the visual image. But you can clearly see that his panels are significantly contributing to the dirty electricity inside his home. So this is a picture of a picoscope reading taken by one of my colleagues in Southern California. And this is the baseline reading. There's actually a lot going on here that I would want to investigate, but more importantly, let's take a look at what happened when the homeowner's Tesla Powerwall was turned on. This is just crazy. I mean, this is so much activity happening in this picoscope reading here. Now, I should say that I have tested several solar systems and I don't always see an elevation like this. Again, all situations are very different. I recently tested one of my clients' homes here in Boise and their reading looked surprisingly low. Now, why exactly that is hard to say. It was later in the afternoon, it was the middle of winter, so we could have gotten an entirely different reading in the middle of the afternoon in the summer. The bottom line here is that we know for sure that having a solar system on your home will increase your DE levels to some degree. So I could show you a lot more pictures, but I think you get the basic idea here. So I just want to take a second to go back to those main fields that we're concerned about with regards to EMFs, because so far I've only discussed the issues of dirty electricity when it comes to solar. And so this is by far the main issue that solar presents to the homeowner, but what about the other fields? So let's take a look and see if it causes any elevations in the other fields. So as far as electric fields go, solar panels shouldn't directly increase the voltage in your home's wiring. This is a good thing, but keep in mind that most homes have greatly elevated electric fields to begin with. The simple act of sending voltage through the wires in our walls will create fields that emanate into your living space. Of course, I highly suggest that you consult with a building biologist to identify what's going on in your home, or that you get yourself a good meter and become proficient with it. There are ways to reduce the fields you're exposed to, but you want to make sure that you do it right. If you don't do this correctly, you can actually increase those electric fields. So please be careful and seek an expert if needed. So what about magnetic fields? This could be actually a potential issue if your living space is very close to the panels themselves. For example, if your panels are on the top of the roof and you have a bedroom directly underneath it with a low ceiling, you could be close enough to the panels to have some elevated magnetic fields. This is the same situation as large appliances in your home. I will often measure high fields on, say, a refrigerator or a stove, a dryer, for example. That magnetic field usually does drop off to an acceptable level within about a foot. And in that case, we're not too concerned about it unless the item is so close to a living space where the family members spend time. So you never want a bed on the other side of the kitchen wall where the major appliances are, for example. But with solar panels, there is potential for the magnetic field to enter the living space at an unhealthy level. Again, you want to have a meter to check this and see what those levels are. And if you're seriously considering installing solar, even after all we've discussed, then I suggest they are mounted away from the home to avoid this specific issue. It won't solve the issue with the dirty electricity, however. In fact, I often get asked, if the panels are out in the yard or in a field, is that still a problem? Unfortunately, the answer to that is yes. It will be better for the potential issue of the magnetic fields, but it will not minimize the dirty electricity. The location of the panels actually has nothing to do with the dirty electricity that gets sent through the wires in your home. Remember, it's that conversion of DC to AC that puts the DE noise, so to speak, on the wires in your home. So the location of the panels don't influence this. In fact, if you're on the same transformer as your neighbor who has a solar system, you could be getting their dirty electricity on the wires inside your home. This is true not only for solar, but it could be the same for pool pumps, dimmer switches, and other sources of dirty electricities that your neighbors are using on their house. It doesn't really seem fair, right? But this is an important point because even if we clean up our own homes, it doesn't mean that we're in the clear if our neighbors or even the grid itself is dirty. So this is where filtering can help, which I will talk about in just a minute. Lastly, let's talk about radio frequency. So radio frequency comes from our wireless devices, as I'm sure most of you know, things like our cell phones, Wi-Fi, smart devices, and the like. It's how we send information through the air. Since solar panels send power through wires, we don't need to worry about radio frequency unless the solar system uses a wireless device to connect to your phone or other tracking device. And this is actually very common. In today's world, everybody wants information sent to their phone or computer, and solar is no exception. So the system is usually equipped with a radio frequency device that reports to an app informing you of the panel status, how much energy it is or is not producing, its efficiency, and other data. This isn't part of the solar system per se, and it isn't necessary for the solar system to work, but it's a common addition because we live in 2021 and everything wants to communicate with everything. But you can run your solar system without this component. Okie dokie. So now I know that many of you are wondering about filtering. And there are many devices out there in the market that can filter DE to some extent. So are you able to filter DE in a solar system to make it benign? Well, the answer to that is a very unsatisfactory maybe. I know, I wish there was a better answer for this too, but as with all things EMF, it's complicated. I'm sure that many of you are aware of the small plug-in filters that you can use throughout your home from Stetzer, the Graham Stetzer meters, and Greenwave. There are also more expensive whole house filters like the Sine Tamer, static, DNA filters, and a few others. Those are the most popular ones. While these filters can reduce the DE from your solar system somewhat, I personally have yet to see them reduce the levels to what I would consider acceptable. So just keep in mind, this is a work in progress. I have numerous colleagues that are testing solar systems all the time with different filters. And we meet about this often and discuss the best practices that we have found so far. But we really haven't found the magic bullet yet, but we continue to try. So, it's definitely something that we are very aware of and trying hard to mitigate. So while I wish I could just say, if you have, X amount of solar panels on your home, go get this X brand filter and you're all set. But unfortunately, that's just not the reality, at least not at this time. If you do have solar already, then you really need to consult with a building biologist on this. They will need to test your home, try various different filters, and identify the right combination for your specific home. And it is possible to reduce it quite a bit if you get that right combination, which may involve a couple different filters, not just one. Sometimes that's what's important, is you have to combine several of these filters to reduce the different harmonics and frequencies of the dirty electricity that you may be experiencing on your home's wires. Just remember, all situations are different, and what works for one home might not be the best option for your home. Of course, I wish it weren't so complicated, but I suggest saving yourself the heartache and letting a trained professional help you with this one. On that note, I want to take a second to talk about these small plug-in filters I mentioned. These are quite popular, and I see them in numerous homes when I'm doing surveys. Here's what I've noticed. Most people don't know how to use them appropriately. And this concerns me because if you're not using them right, you could be making the situation worse. If you have existing magnetic fields from wiring errors, for example, and you plug a filter into a problem area, you can actually increase your magnetic fields. Obviously, we want to avoid that. I've also been in homes that have dozens of these filters throughout the house. So the manufacturer's instructions will often recommend several filters per room. And I find that's usually not needed, nor necessarily good. Before you buy filters and start plugging them into every outlet in your house, it's really important that you consult with someone that understands the details of how these filters work. The last thing you want to do is waste your money and make your situation worse. Remember, I offer EMF consulting right here through Shield Your Body. So if you have questions about these things, I recommend that you book a consult. It'll save you so much time, money, and heartache in the long run. I tried to do it on my own for many years. And when I first learned about this topic, and it was a huge waste of time. After a few years, I realized this information was way too complicated for me. And I'm very grateful for the building biologists that I did end up consulting with, because I found that peace of mind was worth every penny. And of course, it inspired me to go through the training itself. So very happy that I did that, of course. So some of you may be wondering about DC systems, direct current only systems. Since it appears that most of the problem comes from the system's inverter, what if you had a small DC only system, which would not require an inverter? You'll sometimes see this for small cabins or RVs. Now, I have to be totally honest here. I haven't tested a whole lot of DC systems just because there aren't that many around and the opportunity hasn't come up. I have, however, talked to many of my colleagues about this, and here's what we've found. If you use DC to power a very small system, like your light circuits only, then it could work. Incandescent lights work pretty straightforward and will easily accept that direct current. So if you want to power the lights in your RV or tiny home, that could be a good option. The problem, however, is when we introduce motors to the equation. Many large appliances, even so-called brushless DC appliances, will have motors that are turning, and that creates dirty electricity in and of itself. So even though you have a strict DC system, once you turn on those appliances, you have the potential for a high source of DE. Among my colleagues who have tested these pure DC systems, they all report high readings for this very reason. So you may be able to filter some of this, but again, we can't know for sure without testing. One way around this is to use gas or propane appliances for larger items like a refrigerator or stove, or for heat, you can use a small wood stove. You could also have your DC appliances work off of batteries. You can also use a passive solar system to heat water. You may have seen these systems, which usually involve some kind of black piping, like black PVC pipes mounted on a roof or a higher elevation. And then they use gravity to feed through to a tank or directly into the home. And there are various ways to employ a passive system like this. Essentially, you're using the darkness of the pipes to attract the sun and heat the water in the pipe that way. If the system has no electrical parts at all, and it is not connected to your electrical system, then it won't have these inherent EMF issues. These can be a great solution for hot water for smaller homes. And if for some reason you simply don't have any other option but to install a solar array for your home, I've been told by a few of my colleagues that the Solar Edge HD Wave and the Enphase seem to be the inverters with the cleanest profile. Another helpful tip, if you already have solar, is to keep the breakers to your bedrooms turned off at night. This can help to reduce your DE exposure pretty significantly. You just need to make sure that you're testing both the electric field and the dirty electricity before and after turning off the breakers to make sure you're getting the results you want. Note that you may need to turn off multiple breakers, as adjacent circuits to the room that you're turning off may actually contribute. So by combining a few different techniques, you could create a low EMF home, even if you do have a few panels, but there are several variables to keep in mind. So again, if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't forget to reach out to a professional for guidance. So I just want to circle back for a moment and reiterate that I am 100% for alternative energy and, reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. I hope that in future years, we can make improvements to alternative energy like solar so that it doesn't come with these inherent EMF issues. In the meantime, if you're considering solar, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it to you? I know people that were perfectly healthy and not sensitive to EMFs until they installed solar on their homes, and then they became sensitive. Of course, we don't know if this will happen to you, but it's a risk I personally would not be willing to take. It's definitely not the conclusion that I wanted to come to, but if we don't have our health, what do we have? And really, to be honest, I get a lot of pushback when I'm having this conversation with people. They're adamant that we have to have a better way of producing energy. I totally agree with that. We do need better ways, and we need it now. We need it yesterday, right? So until we get clean energy sources that is also clean for our health, then we really need to focus on our own habits. This is one important piece of the equation that I think is often very overlooked. Instead of looking for all of the alternative energy sources, we should first prioritize a reduction of our own energy usage. So this truly is the best way to reduce our reliance on dirty energy and improve our health at the same time. So for example, we don't need to have every light on in the house all day long, right? We don't need to have the radio or TV on in the background all hours of the day. We don't even need to have all the breakers energized to our house 24/7. To make a positive environmental impact, I suggest turning off breakers to rooms you don't use, unplug anything and everything you're not using to reduce these vampire energy drains, be mindful about all the electronics that are on and using power, keep lights to a minimum, and use some of these portable solar panels to charge items in your home. Those don't plug into your home's electricity and they are perfectly fine to use. One note though about turning on and off your breakers, if you do decide to do this, you want to install a device like the Sleep Safe switch, which will de-energize your breakers with the push of a button. You don't want to actually flip your breakers every day as they're not designed for that kind of wear and tear. I do have the Sleep Safe listed on my website if you wanted to go check that out. So these are all just little steps. It might not seem like much to you, but they all add up to make significant improvements. Just imagine if we all did this. We could really make a big dent in the amount of energy that we need. I know it may sound kind of extreme to some of you, but I personally think it's the opposite. I think that how we're living in today's world is what's extreme. Remember, it was only about 100 years ago that electricity was even put into our homes. For nearly all of human existence, we have survived without using electricity. We can read by candlelight, enjoy the ambiance of moonlight, relish in the quiet of a TV turned off, reconnect with ourselves in ways that we haven't been able to with our seemingly ubiquitous reliance on screens. So I know that that may not be the conclusion that you were hoping for, but it simply is the reality of where we are today. And I would actually argue that we have a great opportunity to use this knowledge to our advantage by disconnecting more and focusing on the natural world around us. So that pretty much wraps up the main content that I wanted to share with you on solar. Now, I know that we've got a lot of questions coming in, and I'm going to answer as many of those as possible. But before we get to that, I believe that R has a few things that he would like to say. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it over to R.
Am I?
You are the host.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So let me. Thank you, Cathy, for, oh, my video isn't on. Not that everyone needs to see me, but thank you, Cathy, for another great presentation. This information is so important, and it's great for all of us to have the opportunity to hear from a qualified expert like you. And it's really great to see how much participation we're having in this webinar. There's a lot of people here. There's a lot of questions being asked. So yeah, we're about to get back into Q&A. But before we do, I just had one quick thing I wanted to cover. I know that all of you in attendance today appreciate having access to someone of Cathy's training and caliber. Here at SYB, we get so many questions all the time. Some, they're easy enough to answer. Some aren't as easy, and some are really unique and take time to dive in to get you the right information. And we all know there's a lot of bogus information about EMF online. It can be really hard to know what's real, what's accurate, and what's reliable. And that's exactly why I launched SYB Remote EMF Consulting Services late last year, to create an easy way for people like you to connect with certified experts like Cathy to get all of your questions about EMF answered correctly. With SYB Consulting, you can book time easily and instantly. You get personalized advice and detailed answers from a certified EMF expert from the comfort of your own home, using Zoom on your own schedule, and you get a recording of your session. And you book time with Cathy. Cathy doesn't need an introduction because you've just heard from her. You know how deeply informed she is and how much she cares about these issues. She's a certified building biologist and also certified by them as an EMF specialist. She assesses buildings for anything that may be causing health problems, including EMF exposure, indoor air quality, mold, chemical off-gassing, and ventilation. Combining building biology and holistic nutrition, she addresses both the body and the environment to help people like you achieve optimal health. And on top of all of that, she's also an experienced EMF advocate. As the founder for Idahoans for Safe Technology, an advocacy and awareness group for the safer use of modern day communications. I could not be happier to have Cathy as our senior EMF consultant. And as a thank you to all of you who have attended today's webinar, I have a special offer for you. So if you book your consulting session today before midnight, you can save 35% on your session by entering the code SOLAR35 at checkout. So you just go to this link, shieldyourbody.com/consult, pick your time, and enter code SOLAR35 at checkout. This is a special 35% off coupon for you to have direct access to Cathy to ask any questions you might have about solar, about dirty electricity filters, about power lines, about EMF mitigation. This is an opportunity for you to get any questions you have answered in a one-on-one meeting with a certified EMF expert. So remember, you can book consulting anytime, but this code will only work today. It's only for those of you who are attending this session live. If you're watching this as a recording, this code will not work. So I recommend that you act now. And with that, I'm going to, let's get back into Q&A. And Cathy, I'll just start with a couple that were submitted in advance, if that works for you. And there's one here that I feel like we got a couple of different versions of. And it's about, well, I'll read it. It's, our neighbor has solar panels on a small outbuilding for his swimming pool, which is close to our house. What can we do to prevent the EMFs? And that gets into, I think, the broader question of what can you do to, right? Because a lot of the advice you gave was about what to do in your own home. What about from your neighbors or other people nearby?
Excellent question. So so more often than not, when I'm doing a survey and I turn off all of the electricity in a person's home, I still can get readings of dirty electricity coming into their home from the grid itself or from their neighbors. If you are on the same transformer with a neighbor that has a pool pump or solar panels, it's pretty likely that you're getting some of their dirty electricity. And what I would recommend is filtering that at your panel, at your main panel. So you want to filter as much of that dirty electricity as you can in between your service drop or your service entry before in the main panel before that dirty electricity gets onto all of the circuits on your panel. So you can have an electrician do this. Now, which filter to choose is tricky because we don't know the specific frequencies, because each of these filters responds a little bit differently to the different frequencies. And that's where it's valuable to have a building biologist or other EMF consultant that has some of these filters that they can test to see what's going to give you the best reduction. Or you can, just try. Sometimes we just have people install some of these filters. What I actually like to do is have an electrician install 2 new outlets, one on each phase before your breaker panel. And I put either the Graham-Stetzer filters or the Greenway filters into those outlets. You can do between 2 to 4 of those filters. It works quite well, and it's going to be the cheapest option. But it depends on how much of that dirty electricity you're measuring on your lines. You may need to have a more heavy duty industrial type of filter to really get those levels as low as you want. So it takes a little bit of juggling and trial and error until you find the specific, the specific reduction that you're trying to achieve. And that's just going to take some testing.
Thank you. Another question that I've seen a couple of times come through in various ways. I know a focus of your talk was about the risks of dirty electricity, but a lot of people are also aware of and want to try to protect against fields emanating from the panels themselves. So what are the recommendations that you or other building biologists might make about dampening or blocking or shielding the emissions from the panels themselves?
Yeah, so we're primarily concerned about magnetic fields from the panels, and they shouldn't give off extremely high levels of magnetic fields, meaning that it's a point source, just like a refrigerator is a point source. So I often will get very high readings on a refrigerator, but it drops off within a foot. So we're not really that concerned about it because, we just know that if we have that appropriate distance, then it's not going to be in our living space. However, if your bedroom is on the other side of that refrigerator, then that is an issue. It could be an issue because you could be getting that field, right where you put your head at night, and that's a problem. And so it's the same situation for the solar panels. If you're right next to them, you could have a magnetic field on that panel. And so it depends on, if you're going to mount them on your roof, it depends on how close a living space is to the roof. If you've got an attic and there's a good distance between the panels themselves and the living space, it might not be an issue at all. And I have tested this before, I was in a home where they did have solar panels and there was a bedroom directly underneath, and the bedroom ceiling was quite low. So there was actually not that much of a distance between the living space and the panels, and there was an elevated field on that. So best practice would be to have them off of the house so that you mitigate, you just don't have to deal with that issue at all. But like I said, if you've got a pretty big distance between your roof and the living space, probably not going to be much of an issue. And the electric field doesn't really have much of a big electric field because the wires are put into metal conduit, so that metal conduit will shield the electric field and shield some of it will shield the electric field. And then the radio frequency piece is, it's only going to have radio frequency if you have it enabled to send data from the system, to your phone or your computer or whatever. And you should be able to disable that radio frequency piece.
Thank you. I'll do one more from the pre-submitted questions, and then I think we have quite a few lined up here in the pod. So the last question here for now has to do with the solar farms or solar arrays that can cover acres and acres and acres. What do you have any insight or experience as to what those can do to neighborhood grids, or how far the impact might spread throughout the grid?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And again, like with all things EMF, it depends, right? There's definitely a risk that the closer your home is to a solar farm, the more likely you might be picking up some of that dirty electricity. So, it all kind of depends on the connections of the systems. If the part of your grid is also connected to the solar farm in some way, because most of our distribution systems are connected in some form. When it leaves the power plant, it kind of creates a circle and it goes back to the power plant. So if your home is in some way connected to that system that it's on, you do have a potential for high fields, but we have no way of knowing that unless we're going to test. So again, just very important to get a meter or to hire a consultant so that we can test to find out. And be mindful of, if you're purchasing a home, like with the substation, for example, be mindful of where the substation is next to your home, because that's also another big source. It's kind of a similar situation. We're sending current in our electricity to the substation and it's leaving the substation. And if your home is close to that, you will be getting a lot of your neighbor's current that's going back to the substation, and you could have very high elevated fields. So be very mindful of that when you're looking for a home. And before you purchase a home, please test it. Please have an EMF professional come and do some basic readings so that you know whether or not it's a safe home for you to buy.
Thank you. There's one question I'm going to answer in the chat pod. Someone's asking about the recording of this session. No, it will not be emailed to you, but it will be posted to our YouTube channel probably by this time tomorrow. So I'm just going to paste in that link right now. And then the other thing I was going to say before handing it back over to you, Cathy, is I see some people have typed questions into the chat pod. I'm going to ask if you want Cathy to actually see your question, to please type it into the Q&A pod, because that's where she's going to be answering questions out of. So with that, Cathy, why don't you go ahead?
All right, great. So let's see. Diane is wondering if shielding between the panel roof is helpful, and separating the inverter from DC to AC to an exterior site is helpful. So shielding between the panels and the roof, no, unfortunately it's not helpful, because magnetic fields are the one field that are extremely difficult to shield from. So like if you have high magnetic fields from power lines, you can't shield from that. You can't shield your home from that. They will just go right through. And this would be the same thing from your roof to, in between the panels, because it's the electric field, the magnetic field that we are trying to shield, because the dirty electricity goes on your wires, right? And so you can increase the shielding on that if you run all of your wires through metal clad. If you're building new, let's say, and you have solar panels in your plans, if you run all of your wires through metal clad, that's going to help, but it's not going to get the magnetic field portion. And if between the roof and the panels themselves, the magnetic field, you really can't shield from that. It's just too complicated, too difficult to do. So in separating the inverter from DC to AC to an exterior site, I'm not sure I totally understand that question. Separating the inverter. So I guess,
yeah. So about moving it like to another small structure on the property.
Okay, moving the inverter itself. No, doesn't matter, because it's connected to the wires, right? So no matter where the inverter is, it is sending the current through your wires that already has that dirty electricity on it. But if you are able to put your wires in metal clad, then that can help to some degree. Okay. Annie's asking, would it be safer to have solar panels mounted away from? Yeah, so I answered that. What kind of reading do LED lights produce? Well, so they're all different, right? But potentially very high. I wish I had some pictures handy to show you, but I measured at a client's home just last week. They had a little itty bitty tiny LED panel that they had a decorative pyramid on, very, very small. And I plugged in my oscilloscope and I got this, it was almost looked like that fluorescent light picture that I showed you. I mean, it was just this really big, thick, hairy sine wave reading. And we were going all over the house, plugging stuff in, turning off breakers, trying to find it out. And it was just this little itty bitty LED light. So they can have potential to be quite high. However, that's not always the case. Again, we have to test, but I just recommend that people get incandescent bulbs because I don't want the potential, for that dirty electricity to be there. And most of them I find are pretty high. Okie dokie. Moving along. So an anonymous attendee says, back in 2016, I was able to measure the inverter that did not create any 60 hertz energy. Everything was being put out to 120 hertz or higher. Have you found the solar inverters are doing a better job now at producing normal power line electricity? Or I guess after mitigation, do you still get good 60 hertz power? Yeah, so this is an example of, harmonics being produced. And so there are some companies that are aware of this issue. Like I mentioned earlier, the HD Solar Edge, or is it the Solar Edge HD? They're aware of this issue and they are trying to improve their technology to address this, which I am very grateful of. In fact, I saw that someone in the chat mentioned that. I think she said she was a building biologist and her, it's right here. She's a building biologist and her husband runs Solar Edge, and they have been working on the DC issue for some time. So fantastic. I'm really happy to hear that. And it looks like specifically the HD wave inverter is what they're recommending. So, an important piece to this question is if more of us demand cleaner energy and better products, then the more options we're going to have. So we need to kind of vote with our dollars here in this case and create more demand because we need cleaner energy. And it is possible to create these devices in a more appropriate way. So we need to put the demand on the companies and so that we, can have these better options. Okay, which brand of inverters filter out the electricity? So I mentioned the Solar Edge and the In-Phase. Okay, so is it Janice? I'm probably butchering that name. I'm so sorry.
Denise, I think.
Okay. Some solar systems are also being run by a Wi-Fi router. Yeah, that's right. So she says this means people are getting slammed by both dirty electricity and radio frequency. And in places like New York, they immediately put a smart meter on your home when you sign up for solar. That's absolutely right. I'm glad that you mentioned this. So we do need to think about those issues too. So we've got the dirty electricity from the solar, plus the smart meter and the radio frequency if it's working off of Wi-Fi. So if you decide to get a solar system, you need to check those things first, right? And make sure that you have an option to disable the radio frequency so that it can function without being connected to your Wi-Fi, or that it can be hardwired to your router, to your internet. And maybe you need to decide whether or not you can opt out of a smart, quote unquote, smart meter. Those are really important considerations. So thank you for bringing that up. So Paul says Sunny Boy apparently does this for some models. Eric Windheim has metered one in Davis, California. Yeah. So Eric Windheim is a building biologist in Sacramento. He is an excellent, fantastic resource for this specific issue and dirty electricity. And I have heard him talk about the solar edge, in addition to the Enphase and Sunny Boy as well. I don't know how many he's measured. So I don't know how, confident we are in saying that those are super effective, because again, every situation is different, but that would be another model to look into. Okay, Kirby asked, does a solar system require you then to have a smart meter? Right, so similar question that I just answered. Maybe, sometimes they do, sometimes it depends on where you live, right? So here in Boise, Idaho, we don't use, well, we use smart meters, but they're not the radio frequency smart meters. So they're not the smart meters that people typically think of. They don't send radio frequency through the air. Rather, they send the data back through our power lines, which in and of itself causes dirty electricity, which is why I like to filter at the panel for many homes here. So I don't know. It depends on where you live and whether or not the utility company requires you to have a smart meter.
I'll just jump in. Paul put it in the chat. If in California, if you don't sell your energy back, you don't need a smart meter.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. And so that is, yeah, that's a common situation, that it depends on whether or not you're going to sell your electricity back to the utility, and that's why they would measure it. So if you're off grid, for example, clearly you don't need one. So good point. Okay, Paul asks, what about DC from panel to DC battery, then powering DC appliance, no inversion needed? Yeah, you can do that. You just got to make sure, like I mentioned, that your DC appliances, well, that the DC appliances themselves aren't the issue. So we can do DC from panel to DC battery, but the appliance itself, even though it says brushless, when the motors are turning is when we start to have some of that dirty electricity component. So we just got to be really careful about the appliances we're choosing. If we decide to have a strict DC system, that the appliances aren't in and of themselves giving off this dirty electricity. So it's challenging. And I wish I could say, oh, this appliance is great and this appliance isn't, but we just don't have that kind of data at this time. So you just got to be a little bit careful about which appliances you're choosing. And I will say that the more energy efficient the appliances are, it has the higher potential. Well, energy efficient appliances tend to give off a lot of dirty electricity, unfortunately, right? This is going against everything we're trying to do here, but it's just the way that it is. And so again, we need more consumer demand for these appliances to, be shielded and filtered and to not give off these high levels of dirty electricity that are going to be put into our homes. Okay, Diane says, how about utilizing direct current devices? Yep, we just kind of charged that. Can charge use computers set without AC. Yeah, so I did mention briefly, you can get these little solar panels. Oftentimes they will like unfold into some of these bigger panels that you just put out in the sun to charge. And a lot of them you can plug into a computer, you can charge a phone, you can charge small appliances like that. I think those are great. A lot of people use them when they go camping or, they're off grid for some reason. Those are great. And I think that, it's good to have that kind of an option if you want to charge smaller devices. The thing about computers and phones is that, with the AC current that we have and the computer runs on DC current, it's difficult because that conversion has to happen. So when you've got the external solar panels, great. I would definitely use them. I have tried some and they leave a little bit to be desired in their efficiency, but I'm sure there's ones out there that work better than others. And so it might just be a little trial and error to find one that works really well. If anybody has one that you're using that you think is great, you want to put it in the chat, that'd be excellent. So then we can share that with everybody else. That'd be great. Okay, David says, I have an 8.84 kilowatt array with 34 panels using in-phase microinverters per panel. Is there less DC with several small inverters versus one large inverter next to the panel? Very good question. And I have seen it go both ways. So I would have to test your specific home to give you an answer for that. So this is basically saying you can get a system where there are panels, you know, the panels are, let's say, on your roof, and then they all link to a big, you know, box on the side of your house, and that's the inverter. Or you can have a system that's got little micro inverters under each panel, and then it sends that, you know, the electricity to your home that way. Yeah, I've seen it go both ways, unfortunately. So we're gonna have to test your house to figure out if, you know, if it's less or more for your specific situation. Okay, Phil says if the panels and the inverters are located away from the home, yeah, we answered that. Okay. So Marlee asked, is this an even bigger problem for those living in RVs that use solar since it's a smaller, more confined space? And does this apply to solar lanterns and chargers? It could potentially be an issue with your RV because it's a more confined space. But then again, you have less appliances and less wiring, so it could actually be less. Sometimes in RVs, the cables are shielded, in which case you are actually going to reduce some of your exposure. So, you know, again, you're going to have to test. You know, getting one of these little meters to test how much you have is a great idea, or just having a, you know, somebody, a building biologist, come and do a little examination for you, I think would be a good idea. So it could go either way. If you have the ability, and I know that you're probably not going to like this answer, but if you have an ability to kill all of the power to the RV at night while you're sleeping, it's going to help dramatically. It can be done. I actually do winter camping quite a bit. I stay pretty warm. I don't have any electricity. I'm in a tent. It does work. You can do it. But, you know, it is, especially in the summer, you know, if you can utilize windows and ventilation and not have the power on while you're sleeping, that really is the best thing to do. And so, yeah, if you have solar panels, chargers, like I mentioned earlier, that, you know, those are fine. And I recommend those. Okay, Lisa wants to know the name of the 2 solar systems that I mentioned. So we've got 3 now. Paul mentioned the Sunny Boy, and we've got the In-Phase and the Solar Edge HD Wave inverter. David wants to know will there be less DC with an old analog meter versus a stupid smart meter? Well, if it's truly analog, then it typically will be less. Those are harder and harder to come by. And a lot of times now, if you want to opt out of a smart meter, you're still getting a digital meter. And those have issues too. Or you're getting a PLC meter like we use here in Idaho, which is a power line communication meter. And those give off DC as well, or DE as well. So if you are able to get your hands on a truly an old analog meter, that should be better. Okay, an anonymous attendee asks, have you tried putting the filters parallel with the inverter output, as in installing outlets between the inverter and your panel? All filters shunt DE to neutral via capacitance. So theoretically, this should be able to clean at least some of the DE, whatever the filter can handle, before it gets to your other breakers. I know Stetzer can clean up to the low megahertz range, and Green Wave can clean up a bit higher frequency to that. Yeah, I haven't tried that. That's a great question. I guess it's a matter of practicality. And is somebody going to do that? You know, if it's practical and you want to give it a try, that's possible. And you're right about the Stetzer and the Green Waves filtering a little bit differently of the ranges, which is, why I like to test both and to see how we get the best reduction. But I mean, to be honest, the Stetzer and the Green Wave both show pretty good reduction in many situations. And oftentimes I think they work just as well as some of the more expensive filters. And I mentioned my colleague Eric one time earlier, and he's got a lot of excellent videos on his YouTube channel. If you want to look at some of this, he shows you in action, putting a dirty electricity filter in, unplugging it, and the amount of filtering it does. And he's got a lot specifically to solar. So I recommend anyone go and check out his channel if you want to see this in action. It's really, he's a wealth of information. Okie dokie. Let's see. Okay, Mary wants to know, for new construction, in terms of how circuits planned so breakers localized appropriately, can breakers be programmed to go off, on and off? Yeah. So you can, so the best thing to do, I think, is to get a switch that you mount at your panel specifically for this reason, that has a remote off and on button. So you just click the button and it turns the breaker off and on. And you can do this for different zones in your house, for different circuits in your home. That's the best way to do it. I mentioned the sleep safe switch. I have a link to that on my website. If you go to Whole Home and Body Health, if you look in the shop section, I have a link to the sleep safe if you want to get more information on that. That's the best way to do it. It's the most convenient. And that way you don't have to turn your breakers off and on all the time. Okie dokie. What about blue light? Yeah. Richard wants to know how blue light affects us. Hugely. So I personally suffered from very severe insomnia for many, many years. And it wasn't until I figured out that my Wi-Fi and, all these EMFs were one of the main contributors that I started to get relief. And it really helped when I started to block my blue light at night. So it affects us in multiple ways, Richard, but specifically what it's doing is when your eyeballs see light, specifically blue light, because the sun has a lot of blue light in it. When we see the light from our light bulbs, artificial light, which is mostly blue, and it's not partnered with the other colors like red and yellow that we get from the sun. We get mostly blue from these light bulbs. And then our brain sees that blue light and it thinks, oh, it's daytime. And you release more cortisol, and your brain does not release melatonin. And of course, we know that melatonin is needed for sleep. So if we get too much blue light in the evenings, many people have a very difficult time sleeping, and it's stressful. It's very stressful because our body's not getting into the sympathetic nervous system, which is how we rest and digest. It's the calm part of our nervous system that helps us to relax and get out of a stress response. So blue light can be very damaging for that reason, because how many of us need more stress in our lives, right? Especially now. It can also cause skin issues and eye issues, too much blue light. So I recommend everybody gets a pair of blue light blocking glasses, and you wear them every single night. You can also use orange light bulbs throughout your house, incandescent orange bulbs. Keep lights off. You can install filtering systems on your computer that will automatically dim the blue light at night. And, all of those things are helpful, but blue light blocking glass is very, very important. Okay, Denise wants to know, can I talk more about portable solar panels and brands? Yeah, like I said, I don't have a great answer for you. I've tested a few, and I haven't found ones that are amazing yet. So I'm hoping that maybe somebody has typed that into the chat. I'm not on top of the chat, so, or if you see anything, let me know so I can share that with people.
So yeah, I didn't catch that. So.
Just if any,
I didn't catch it in the chat, so I don't know if someone did.
Okay, perfect. Well, if anybody has that, let us know. So Raymond says, I noticed that Cathy is a graduate of Creighton University. That is true, and so are you. Oh, nice to meet you, Raymond. What do you think of the harmony pendants that are supposed to neutralize somehow the negative effects of EMFs? Excellent question. So there's a lot of people out there that are recommending that specific device and others. And my opinion on these tends to kind of change here and there. So here's where I'm at now. I do think that some people get symptom relief from these devices, these harmonizers. Some people do not. And I've had many clients that have tried X brand and they say, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. And I have another client that tried X brand and they say, actually, it made me feel worse. And, this client tried Y brand and she feels better. And this client tried Y brand and she feels worse. So everybody gets different responses to these things if they get a response at all. And in the past, I used to say, if you want to spend your money on these and try them, go for it. What's the harm? However, what I'm afraid of, and I can't say with scientific certainty that this is what's happening, but what I have seen and what some of my colleagues have seen is that we think that with some of these devices, the body kind of becomes a little bit lazy in protecting itself. So you might get this initial boost of, oh my gosh, I feel so much better when I'm wearing this necklace. But then the body kind of relaxes and stops kind of protecting itself from its exposure. And then over time, you can end up having worse symptoms. This is very theoretical. I don't have scientific information to prove this. This is just a thought that we think, that we've kind of seen happen with some people. So I am cautious about them. I want people to get symptom relief. Absolutely. It's very important. So I guess I just say, if you choose to use one of these, be cautious, because I definitely don't want anyone to, have worse symptoms down the line. I would say that there's a lot, on this front. If you are sensitive, it is very important to make sure that you're addressing what's going on in your body. There's many precursors and histories that you've experienced that may be contributing to your sensitivity, like a physical trauma, like an emotional trauma, like heavy metals, silver fillings, chemical exposure, many things that may be contributing to why you are sensitive. And the best thing you can do is work with a qualified practitioner that can identify what your precursors are and help you to address those so that your body has more resiliency. And then when you are exposed, you can handle that insult better. So that would be my best answer to that. And, you can always reach out to me if you want to talk more about that. Okay. Oh, I'm currently renting a home on a month-to-month basis. There are solar panels and she's very EHS. I'm so sorry. Oh, that is not fun. Before COVID, I would leave the home during the day, but now that is impossible. I can see and feel the DE. It is horrible. Both my daughter and I are having challenges that are coming from the DE. Yes. So you need to regain your health ASAP. Yep. Okay. So yeah, Elle, you're saying, can you possibly help me? I think offline, maybe or online. Yeah. Reach out to me, Elle, and we can talk further. Just, for anyone that's sensitive, some of those things that I was mentioning earlier is, making sure that you are addressing some of those precursors. And of course, what I want, when I say reach out to me, reach out to SYB, because I do consulting for them, and you can schedule an appointment with me if you want to talk about your specifics through this link that's on the website right now, or the link, and use this code, of course, so we can talk more about your specific situation. Okay. Raymond, is it best to find a building biologist close by to actually come into her house, or can it be done long distance somehow? Yeah, so Raymond, it depends if you've got a very complex situation, let's say you have a meter and you've got really big high magnetic fields, or you've got current on your water pipe or something like that, you need an expert to come to your home. If you don't know and you're just trying to cover the basics, you want to learn to hardwire your internet, you've got a couple measurements and you need some suggestions on how to fix those, that kind of thing, you can do a lot via distance. I've helped numerous clients through Shield Your Body and our consulting services long distance. And sometimes it's just you need to chat with someone to figure out what the best course of action is for you. I would suggest take advantage of this generous coupon that Shield Your Body is offering. That's a fantastic savings there. So I would definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah, the one other thing I'd say, I mean, in general, a certified consultant who can come to your house can obviously do a lot more and get into, particularly if there's a complex issue. There's also, though, the minimum. So A, they need to be near enough to do it. But then B, there's also the minimum time requirement. Because when you're booking through our consulting service, the minimum time requirement right now is about 20 minutes. And so you don't need to pay for a half day or a whole day of consulting if your problem doesn't require, or your question doesn't require a half day or a whole day of consulting in order to answer it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a great point. If you've just got a couple questions, don't hire someone to come over to your house because it's going to be very expensive. But ultimately, if your ultimate goal is, you can feel it, something's going on, you don't feel well in your house, a building biologist can be very helpful, especially because it could be a mold issue. I didn't mention that earlier, but so many times people become sensitive because they've had a big mold exposure. That's a really big deal, and that needs to be fixed. So, you can reach out to us and also let me know where you are in the world, and I can maybe recommend someone. If you're still in Omaha, I don't actually know anyone in Omaha because Raymond went to Creighton, which is where I went to school. I may know someone, so reach out and I can potentially help you find someone or help you with that. Okay, Elle says the electrical at our house is bad. The office gives off sparks. Oh boy. I have many circuits turned off at all times, and there are a few that I turn on sometimes. It is one story. Is turning off the circuits going to cause more problems? Okay, important question. So if you've got sparks, that's a big deal. I mean, I'm hoping maybe you're just saying, like, if you touch something metallic or a light switch, you maybe get a spark. But if you've got actual sparks going on, you need to call your utility company immediately and have them come fix that for you, because that's a big problem. So assuming that is fixed, turning off the circuits, you do want to test. You want to test because if I were to turn off the circuits in this room, but there is a bedroom right next door here, the wires in that bedroom, if it's on a different circuit, they're still hot. And so if I've got wires running in this wall, this way, and the bedroom has wires running this way, and they're close to each other, they're actually going to cancel each other out to some degree, and they're going to reduce your electric field. So now if I turn the circuit off to this room, but not the room next to me, that cancellation goes away and my fields can actually increase. So you do want to test. You want to have a meter to test for that. And I didn't get into those meters on this webinar, but I have the I recommend the Cornet meter for this, for the electric fields. It is a very good meter. And I believe that Shield Your Body has an ebook on testing that can give you some more information. And they recommend some meters as well. And you can always, it's a good idea if you get a meter, you take some measurements, and then you want to consult with me about what those readings mean. That's a excellent way to do it too. That works really well. Create a little map of your home, write down the readings you get in different areas of your house. We can do quite a bit with that.
And I'm just going to jump in, and I just pasted it into the chat pod, but our next webinar on February 25th is actually going to be all about at-home EMF testing and covering meters and meter usage. And everyone who registers gets a copy of the ebook that Cathy mentioned. So it's shieldyourbody.com/webinar. It's on February 25th. Also a free webinar. Sorry to interrupt. Please.
Yeah,
please
no,
continue.
thank you. Thank you for that. Anonymous wants to know what level of the green wave is too high for health. Ooh, yeah. So great question. And you know, it's impossible to say because we don't know at what level you're going to react to. I like to see the green wave get under 50. And with the gram Stetzer meter, I like it to be under 100. You know, ultimately, we want to get it as low as possible. If any of those meters are over 100, then we know that we need to filter for sure. If you're under 100, you know, under 50 would be better, but under 100 is, we're getting pretty good. But those are, you know, again, impossible to say for sure because very sensitive people will react to even 50. I have one client who she knows when I'm in her house and we're filtering and I'm testing out the different filters, if I get my reading under 40, she's good. She's like, yep, I feel great. If it's above 40, she can feel it. And I have other clients who are very sensitive where 100 is their threshold. So, you know, depends on your sensitivity, but that general ballpark is a good number to aim for. Okay, Gail wants to know what to do about people living above and both sides. Yeah, challenging. So we don't know because we don't know which fields you're dealing with. There is shielding and filtering that we can do, but Gail, for that, you know, you're going to need a professional to test each of the 4 fields to see what are the highest readings and how to shield appropriately, because we're talking about multiple different variables here. Marlene wants to know, by chance, would there happen to be a database that tracks where a majority of solar panels are located? Very interesting, Marley. I don't know the answer to that. I know that you can do a Google Earth image of your neighborhood, assuming that it's been updated recently. And you can see when I'm doing an assessment for a client, sometimes, you know, I'm picking up really high readings and I'm thinking there's something got to be going on in the neighborhood. So I'll look at a Google Earth overview on my computer and I'm like, oh, yep, there's the solar panel 3 houses down or whatever. So that can help if you're concerned about what's in your immediate neighborhood. So Diane says shielding through metals, aluminum versus copper. So yeah, if you want to shield with metal, that could be electric fields, or it could be radio frequency, or dirty electricity to some degree. Copper works better, but it's more expensive. And aluminum does work pretty well. So if you're extremely sensitive and you have the budget, I'd go with copper, but aluminum does work quite well. Okay. Christine says the FCC's CISPR document module 11 specifically states the device that generate conducted emissions cannot be sold in the US. Am I looking at an older version of that document? I do not know about that document, Christine. If you want to post that in the chat, I'd have to look at that. I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to there. Deborah wants to know, have you heard of any concerns that because the capacitive filters require power and create a large capacitive load, that it could interfere with the function of the inverter or damage the inverter? I have not. I have not seen that. I want to say that I don't think that's a problem, because if it were, my colleagues would know about that by now. I mean, I've been in this field for what, 4 or 5 years now, but many of my colleagues have been doing this for decades, and that has never come up in our discussions. So I do not think that that is an issue, but Deborah, I would like to check on that to be very certain. So I can look into that for you and you can get a hold of us so I can give you a better answer, but I haven't heard of it. You know, I'm pretty sure that we would know that by now. Okay, Elle says, my mother lives in a group home. They installed solar and they have smart meters. In addition, they have a lot of Wi-Fi. It seems as though all the ladies' memories have declined rapidly since they installed the solar and Wi-Fi cameras. Could there be a connection? In my world, Elle, I think that there absolutely could be a connection. Cannot say for sure, right? I absolutely can't say that that is the reason. There's a lot of other issues here, you know, but I know that when I'm around a lot of Wi-Fi, my brain is not good. It does not function great. I mean, I just see this all the time. And, you know, among my clients, all the time, you know, brain fog, short-term memory issues, you know, insomnia, and insomnia is going to affect all those things as well. I absolutely believe that there could be a connection, and there's a significant amount of scientific research to suggest that. Okay, Melissa says, can you envision a time in the future when homes will need to go through an EMF assessment like they currently do for a home inspection as part of a real estate transaction?
I love this question.
Yeah, that I am agreeing with you. I wish that were the case. So I've had a lot of people say you need to reach out to real estate agents so that, you know, you can have your services, you know, before you go into a home. The issue with that is, I agree with that, but a lot of real estate agents don't want that, because if I find something that's not great, then they're potentially losing the sale, right? However, I think it should absolutely be a requirement. I don't know if it ever will be required, but I think that, you know, we're starting to reach a tipping point where there's so much awareness about this topic that more and more people are beginning to do a pre-purchase inspection. And they're easy. They're one of my favorite things to do, because I can get in there and test real quickly to make sure that there's no deal breakers, like magnetic fields from a power line, you know, or a radio frequency from a cell tower, something like that, that may potentially be a deal breaker. And the, you know, the benefit that the homeowner or the potential homeowner gets is just fantastic. In fact, I was asked to go to a home just yesterday and test the magnetic fields because there were some high tension power lines close by. Sadly, my readings were very high, and I had to tell the potential homeowner that I would walk away. I personally wouldn't buy the house. It was pretty devastating because they were really in love with the home, but they had small children, and thank goodness that she thought to test, because how devastating would it be to move into that house with your children and then find out that you have an issue? So it's an awesome question. And
yeah, and I would just add, I mean, obviously neither of us can say whether that will ever be a requirement. But if it becomes one, it's going to be buyer driven. It's going to be people, the home buyers who are insisting on it. If more people take their tri-field or their coronet to an open house, you know, the agents will start recognizing that. It'll be, so the market will adapt to the buyer demands. And so it's people like you that are going to help make something like that happen.
Yeah, yep, agreed. Paul G wants to know, does Cathy's consulting include EMF-free sports betting tips? Maybe. If you pay a little extra, Paul G, I'll give you some EMF-free sports betting tips. Okay. Uh-oh, another tough name, Belansky. So sorry if I'm butchering that name. Is there a dirty E filter for DC? Well, DC itself doesn't create any dirty electricity. So if you just have straight DC, that's a really clean power source. So you don't need a filter for that. Grace wants to know, is cable internet safer than fiber optics? Well, so fiber can have its own dirty electricity issues. You should be able to filter that at the panel. And to be totally honest, Grace, I haven't had the opportunity to test a lot of homes with fiber. That's becoming more and more common, which is great. I do, however, test houses with cable every day. I will often find current on the cable line, almost always. And what I do is I just install a little filter that removes all of that current from the cable line right there. It's pretty cheap and easy to do. I mean, the filters are under $50 usually, and I just screw it right on there, and then I retest, and it removes all of that current, and it's a great way to do it. So I don't know to what degree fiber is contributing at this time. I'll have to test a bunch more houses to see, but cable is good, and almost all of us have the opportunity to get cable. Do you know how far the DE fields extend into the room? Yeah, usually about 6 to 8 feet they can extend into the room. So in most of our rooms, even if we're in the center of the room, unless it's really huge, we're probably still getting a good dose of dirty electricity no matter where we are in that room.
Yeah, and I would just add, and someone brought this up at the, I think it was Peter at the EMF medical conference that just happened last weekend, that the dirty electricity meters that you talked about in this session, those are all designed to measure the dirty electricity on the circuit. And so as of right now, certainly not at the consumer grade, I don't know about the professional grade, there's no real way to measure what the dirty electricity might be in the middle of the room as opposed to on the circuit itself. Is that right, Cathy?
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. That is true. And one thing that we can do on the oscilloscope that I have, there's an antenna that we can put onto one of the ports, and that antenna will actually let us hear the noise, so we can move around the room, and we can get into a room, and we can see how much dirty electricity is in the air that way. But most people don't have an oscilloscope like that to check it, but we can verify that it extends a good 6 to 8 feet out that way. All right. Raymond says, if you put the shielding units in the electrical panel in the garage on the incoming and outgoing lines, where and how do you measure to see if it canceled the DE? Yes. So I like to put the filters before the panel, and we use the same meters inside the house so if I'm in your kitchen and I measured a high field, and I'm going to do this in every room, I'm going to measure in every room in the house to see, once we put those filters in at the panel, I'm going to go and retake the measurements to make sure that it reduced. And, admittedly, sometimes we don't get every device, because when you're filtering at the panel, you're filtering what's coming in from the grid, but then you go into your house and you plug in a computer charger, or you plug in a plasma TV, or you have an energy efficient furnace, etc. So the devices that you add after your breaker panel are going to contribute, which is why I'm constantly telling people to unplug stuff. Like, most of us are just used to, we've got TVs and computers and everything plugged in all around our house, and we leave everything plugged in all the time, lamps, and we don't need to do that. We need to keep things unplugged. And if that's inconvenient, you just put a little outlet switch into the outlet, and then say it's your lamp, and then you plug your lamp into that. And then you just hit the switch, and it de-energizes all of that voltage that's on that cord. And it's the same thing as unplugging it. And that makes it really easy to de-energize all the loads in your house, so that you are reducing the DE that you're putting back on your line from your devices. Okay. Anonymous says, my building has solar panels directly on top of my room, but the energy electricity goes to the city from the panels, not to my building. Can this be harmful to me? Well, hopefully you don't have a magnetic field from that. Hopefully that you're not too close You know, again, the magnetic field typically does drop off pretty rapidly. So you'd want to test that. And the energy goes to the city, not to your building. Well, you know, anonymous, unfortunately, impossible to know without testing because I don't know all the specifics of that. You do, it has the potential to not be an issue because it's not being directed to your building, to the lines in your building. So I would hope that's the case, but I wouldn't want to say for sure without testing. Okay, also, what frequencies do you tend to see in DC? Is it mostly the harmonics? It often is the harmonics, yes, and then we see all kinds of stuff. 30 kilohertz is often, we can see that around 30 kilohertz for dirty electricity, plus the harmonics. Yeah, I'd say around 30 kilohertz is what I see most often. But, you know, we're still gathering a lot of information on that. With every new generation of devices, all of this changes, right? So there's newer technology all the time. They're changing the way our devices work. And so we're constantly getting new information about that. So yeah, we got to really keep our eye on the latest and the newest devices since the technology changes so rapidly. Okay, Gail says, do I have to be concerned with magnetic fields, dirty electricity, EMFs? Where should I get the 2 electric outlets installed by the electric box? Yes, you need to be concerned with magnetic fields and dirty electricity and EMFs. You need to be concerned with all of those. Where do I get the 2 electric outlets installed? You want it between your service entry and your panel. An electrician should be able to help you with this. You know, and Gail, again, if you want more really specific, detailed information about your home, I would suggest booking a consult so that I can make it really specific to you. Okay, if the ceiling is high and there are LEDs, will we feel the DE? Potentially. I mean, everybody's different. Some people feel it, some people don't. But the LEDs, just because they're high, remember, it's traveling on the wires. So it's not only, I mean, you know, some of it could come from the source itself, but it will be on the wires, and the wires are going through your walls. So the wires aren't only above you, you know, they're in your walls and sometimes in your floors. So yes, if you feel it, if you're that sensitive, you may feel it even though that they're high. Okay, David says, if we have already done our testing and have installed DE filters throughout the home and our average readings below 100, then we add solar system to the top of our garage away from the living space. What other mitigation efforts would you recommend after installation of a panel system with backup battery? Well, David, I would recommend that you use one of the systems that I mentioned earlier that tend to be lower. And then you need to retest, right? So once they are installed, you need to retest to see how your readings have increased or decreased. And if they've increased substantially, then you may need to consider a bigger filter, like a DNA filter, that's going to reach different frequencies than the green wave filters do. So it's going to depend on what happens after that installation. And I definitely would consider the EMF sleep safe switch, so that you can de-energize your breakers at night.
I'm just gonna jump in here. We're approaching a quarter to the hour, and Cathy, you've been roaring here now for almost 2 hours. So, if you want to pick a few more to answer, that's great. But you know, we have a lot of them coming in, so I don't think you need to feel obligated to.
Okay.
I know it's your tendency to answer everyone's questions, but answer as many as you feel comfortable. But I just want to give you a time check.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay. Yeah, I do see that you're right, there's still a lot coming in. Well, I see that Elle just asked about the EMF kill switch. Yeah, um, that's the same thing, the same device that I mentioned, the EMF sleep safe. It's similar. I mean, a kill switch is just that. And, I often will have an electrician install a kill switch to a bedroom that, they just configure the wires to where you turn off a light switch and it de-energizes the circuits in your room. And so there's various different ones on the market. Yes, I recommend them. I think they're important. I like this sleep safe because they have an option that you can also de-energize the neutral wire because a lot of these only de-energize the hot wire. And if you can also de-energize the neutral, you will get significantly more of a reduction in many circumstances. So I like that one. Okay. What else we got here? So an anonymous attendee says, is EMF radiation making things like mold, viruses, MRSA, and other antibiotic resistant bacteria worse? So that's really interesting because we learned there was an EMF medical conference this past weekend, and we did learn from one of the speakers, Sharon Goldberg, who is a physician and also went through the building biology courses, that actually, yes, that there is some significant research showing that EMF radiation is making more antibiotic resistant bacteria, which is obviously a big concern. And I'm not sure about viruses, but I do know, with mold, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, my clients who are the most sensitive, most of them have had a mold exposure. So there may be a couple things that's going on there. One, the body's just so overwhelmed that it has another insult of the EMFs, and it just, really just is too much for the body to deal with, or it could actually be irritating the mold itself. And I have seen some theories about this, that, the mold is picking up the EMFs and it's releasing its mycotoxins when it's exposed. So I think both of those things could be happening there. Okay, let's see what else we got. Anonymous asks, can shielded cords reduce how far DE extends into the room? Yeah, if the shielded cords have DE on them, yes, they definitely will reduce your electric fields. So they're a good idea. I recommend those frequently. Elle asks, how do RFs seem to bounce around a room? Well, radio frequencies are, depending on the wavelength, the bigger the wavelength, like FM, AM radio, those radio frequency waves are very long, and they tend to be blocked with less efficiency than the smaller waves. And the smaller waves would be things like our cell phones and our Wi-Fi. And so metal is one substance that easily will block or deflect those signals. So if you've got a Wi-Fi router in your room, let's say you've got a metal roof, when that radio frequency goes to that metal roof, it's just going to bounce right back at you. So depending on the materials that you have in your house, most building materials will deflect a small amount to some degree. Metal's just kind of the highest. So it will just kind of, bounce off of your, surfaces kind of back at you, which is why we recommend, if you're going to paint your home or you're going to shield your home in some way, you do not want to use Wi-Fi or any kind of radio frequency device in that house after you have shielded. So, I'm a fan of shielding when it's necessary, but you got to be ready for that. You got to be committed to not using those radio frequency devices inside your your home. Okay, let's see what else we got. So Marlee wants to know, with shielding being focused in the bedroom at night, is there something for daytime for kids like a canopy for when they play in a tent or homemade fort? Absolutely. Yes, Marlee. So Shield Your Body has canopies, which are great. You can look those up on their website. I'm sure R could probably put a link to that in the chat. And they're great. Yeah, canopies are great for just that situation. And you know, even if you're going to turn your breakers off at night, you still want to shield from potential outside exposure like radio frequency from a cell tower or something. So you can put the canopies. The canopies are pretty much designed to be put over the bed. But you can use it for daytime as well. Okay, Debbie asks, for those of us who are not particularly EHS, but just want to prevent chronic disease, how important is all this mitigation given the expense and hassle, especially when it's difficult to determine if vague, non-specific symptoms are hormonal, psychological, toxic, or EMF? Yeah, good question, Debbie. Well, knowing what we know about how the body reacts to EMFs, I think it's very important, especially because we see some of these biological responses happen over time. So even if you don't feel it today, that, you know, oxidative stress is still happening. And over time, your body's developing less and less resiliency. It's just kind of like smoking. You know, some people will be able to smoke 2 packs a day every day of their life and not get lung cancer, but most people will develop problems. The other piece to this is our exposure is dramatically increasing every day. So 5 years ago, our exposure was much less. 10 years ago, it was substantially less because we didn't have Fitbits and smart speakers and smart appliances and, you know, everything we're bringing into our home. I think it's extremely important. And I would also argue that, you know, mitigation doesn't have to be expensive nor a hassle. You just got to know the right way to do it. So, you know, I'm all hardwired in my home here. There are 6 devices, maybe 7 devices that are hardwired. It's not that, I mean, it's really not that big of a deal. Once you understand the simplicity of how to do it, it makes it very easy. So, you know, I would just say, if you're feeling overwhelmed by it, you know, reach out to me at Shield Your Body, reach out to a professional so that we can give you the simple and easy ways to do this. Because I know it does feel very overwhelming in the beginning, especially when you're learning about it. But, you know, a few simple steps here and there with some shielding, some hardwiring, it's going to make a huge difference when you control what's inside your home. So I think it's very important because you don't want to develop symptoms down the road, right? Okie dokie. Beth says, I got a reading of 2,500,000 milliwatts, probably microwatts per square meter in a friend's home using a Safe and Sound Pro 2. Yeah, that's a huge reading. It's very high. Could be the router. My guess is probably their Wi-Fi router. Impossible to know, you know, without being there. That would be a good, that would be a perfect example of when consulting with me would be appropriate. And oftentimes we can do that, like, well, we do it via Zoom. And if we were at your friend's home, and I could actually help you narrow down where that exposure was coming from, because that is very high, and I would definitely want to mitigate that for sure. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes left. Maybe I'll hand it over to you if there's anything else that you want to discuss or mention.
Oh, me?
Yeah. Just want to make sure
right.
that, you know, I don't take up all the time if you wanted to talk
No,
about.
No, it's great. I really appreciate how much time you give back to the community and to our community. And I think everyone here does as well. I just wanted to remind everyone of the deal we have going on right now. where you can book time with Cathy. There were some questions about how that works. So the way it is right now is if you go to this website, shieldyourbody.com/consult, you pick time and calendar, you pick the length of session you want. The sessions start right now as short as 20 minutes, and then you can add 20-minute blocks to them. And you pick a time that works for you. You can look at the calendar in your own time zone, and then as soon as you make the booking and you'll use this code SOLAR35 at checkout, you'll get an email with the access information. You'll get another email with some preparation information from Cathy. And then you just you log into the Zoom room at the time, and you can ask your questions and of course get the recording of your session. So I would just encourage all of you to take advantage of this deal. This is a big discount. We don't often do 35% discounts, but I'm sorry, I'm just seeing a question come in here that I can answer, which is, can I install a canopy mat myself without a specialist needed? Yes, they're self-install. So you just, they're ceiling mount, and the mat goes under the bed, and that's it. So anyway, sorry, I just saw that question pop up, so I wanted to answer it. So yeah, Cathy, I think that was fantastic. That was so much information, and it's really hard information to find, and you packaged it really well, and took over an hour to answer people's questions here, which is really generous, and I know everyone here really appreciates it. One quick housekeeping note, two actually, sorry. The recording of this will be posted to our YouTube channel tomorrow. So that's shieldyourbody.com, it's youtube.com/shieldyourbody. And the next webinar is also going to be a Cathy webinar, and that's on February 25th. You reserve, you register for it. It's free. You register for it at the same place you did this one. That's shieldyourbody.com/webinar. And that's going to be all about how to test EMF at home. And I think that's going to be a really great topic. That was the topic we were supposed to do last March when COVID hit, and we ended up changing our entire content plan for the year based on what was going on in the world. And so I'm excited. We're finally getting back to it. Everyone who registers will get the latest, the 6th edition, just updated, of my ebook about testing EMF at home. It's a really great resource. So again, you register for that at shieldyourbody.com/webinar. With that, Jerry asked to extend the time to make a booking. Jerry, you have until midnight tonight. So that's midnight Pacific time. So that's about 9 more hours. And you don't have to, I mean, you can book in, I should have said, you can book in advance. You can book up to 4 weeks in advance. So you don't need the session to happen tomorrow or the day after. You have 4 weeks in which to pick a time that works for you. Cathy, did you have any final words?
Just thanks everybody who showed up and hung in there for this whole time. This was great. I love the excellent questions from your community. They always challenge me, and I'm so glad to see so much awareness about this very important topic. So thank you so much for putting this on. I'm really happy to have done it.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who turned out today. There was a really big attendance. It's great that all of you were able to set aside this time in your schedules and participate in our community. And that's what makes it such a powerful community. So thank you, everyone. And we'll see you in a few weeks on the February 25th webinar. Have a great evening.
Bye.